Continuing with the theme of the Gemara and the Mishnah and the rest of the Mesechta Megillah, halachas that take place when you are in shul. How do you have to act in a shul? So we've learned what the chazan has to be like. We learned how he shouldn't stutter. We learned about the Kohen, shouldn't have certain physical defects, which people will start making fun of a Kohen. Oh, look at that Kohen with that funny voice. Look at that Kohen who's a midget. As a matter of fact, there's even a Rishon which says that a Kohen who's a midget should not go up to do Birchas Kohanim if he's the only Kohen, because people will think that he's a child. But if he has a beard, it's not a problem. People will realize that he's grown up, that he's an adult. The idea that you have to respect everybody. We had the story of the Rebbe with the person who was injured in the terrorist attack, and the Rebbe would not put his head down during Mincha on Erev Shabbos, although there are very special things that go on. Pikabala then, and the Rebbe did it every single Erev Shabbos for many, many, many years. And the Rebbe did not do it in order not to offend someone who couldn't even see, who was blind, but that he shouldn't think that the Rebbe doesn't want to look at him. Now, our next Mishnah will continue with different halachas. Somebody who tries being too much of a pleaser, doing too much, is a sign that something's wrong. The famous example is Esav. Esav used to go to his father, Yitzchok, and ask him, tell me, Tati, how do I give meiser, how do I give a tenth off of salt and off of straw? And these are things which you don't have to give a tenth off to give a meiser. You don't give the tenth to a Kohen or a Levi, because these are things which don't grow from the ground. Or a shrub grows from the ground, but it's not something that you eat. You don't have to give a tenth to meiser, although there's explanations exactly what the question meant, according to Megillah and according to Chassidus, that he meant to say the salt gives taste to food. Do you give a tenth of the value or a tenth of the volume, etc.? If someone tries being too frum, you could say showing themselves to be too religious, too zealous, it could be an issue. If a person could feel like that, but if somebody shows themselves to be like that all the time, that could be an issue. And the Gemara and the Mishnah over here is worried that perhaps this person has a spirit of heresy inside of them. For example, in times of the Alter Rebbe, in times of Maggid Mezrich, the Maskilim, the Enlightenment, those who tried, introducing the Reform movement, they came in the beginning with a claim that you're not being religious enough, you're not being strict enough when you're saying the words, you're pronouncing the words of davening wrong. It took only one generation for them to finally decide, let's stop davening, because we're not saying the words right anyways, and let's make our own prayers. And from there was a downward spiral. So in a similar sense, anybody who thinks or shows themselves as being too extreme, too frum in a certain sense, you have to be worried maybe there's an issue. Ha'omer, says a Mishnah. This is 7 lines from the bottom of the page. Eini over lefnei teva b'tzavuin. White garments are very special. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur were only white. White is pure. On Yom Kippur there was a red string that was tied to the horns of the goat that was pushed down the mountain for the Azazel, and it would turn white to show that your sins were forgiven. Many people, it's a custom on Shabbos, brought down from ancient times, to wear white on Shabbos. And Eretz Yisrael, till today, many people wear white on Shabbos. It's not so regular. Ashkenaz, but there's a white on Shabbos. On Yom Kippur, we all wear white. This is probably 24b3. I don't have an art scroll with me.
24.
24b, near the end. Somebody who says, I only want to be chazan, I don't want to wear colored clothes. So I'm wearing a blue shirt, I'm wearing a checkered shirt, I'm wearing different color clothes. I don't want to be chazan because I'm wearing colored clothes. Af b'levanim lo yavar. He's not allowed to be chazan at all, even wearing white clothes. Again, it's today's a common thing. When I was growing up, at least in Chabad, it wasn't common that everyone wears, at least in yeshivas, and people wear white shirts. It wasn't around when I was growing up. All right, but if someone says you're basing someone based on the color, their white shirt, that's an issue.
Yeah, when I was in yeshiva also, actually, we wore colored shirts.
Exactly. Things change over the years. But as the mission over here says, this is not integral, right? And somebody says, I'm only going to wear white when I daven, he shouldn't be chazan even if he's non-white, because maybe he's introducing new things. Maybe he has some heresy inside of him. This sandal, if somebody says, I'm not wearing shoes. Now, back then in Eretz Yisrael and Israel and Bavel, it was very hot. And leather was very expensive. People get one pair maybe every few years. And shoes were very, were important, were precious. Now, in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple, was actually the Kohanim were not allowed to wear anything on their feet. It was a mitzvah for their feet to be touching the stone floor. But somebody says, I don't want to wear, I don't want to be barefoot when I'm being chazan. I feel it's more respectful to wear shoes. So the Gemara says, Afi yachef lo yavar. You should not be chazan at all. Not when he's wearing shoes and not when they're barefoot. Because there are different idol worshippers, different religions, different sects, which are very particular or strict about these matters, that they have to wear shoes or they have to wear white when they're doing their service of their idols or their deities. Therefore, you're worried perhaps this person, even though they're in shul, if they're saying, I want to wear white only, or I want to wear shoes, perhaps they have a spirit of minus, of fear of denial in Hashem. And therefore, you shouldn't be a chazan, and not just by that prayer, but you shouldn't be a chazan at all in shul. Somebody who says that they're being too strict, they shouldn't be chazan at all in shul for any tefillah, for any prayer. Doesn't mean you're not allowed to wear white.
We all lost the picture.
I can see you. You're the main picture.
There we go. Rabbi, you're on mute.
It's happening more often nowadays. I have to figure it out. Maybe
You're on mute, he
they
said.
were good.
Oh, no.
Fine.
You said you're on mute.
Right, so if somebody is particular that they want only white, it's an issue. If they're sometimes wearing white, it's not a problem, but they're saying, I only want this, that's a very, very big problem. We actually have an interesting story happened when I was in yeshiva in Toronto. There was a certain boy, a bacher, who, just became, how do you say, he wasn't born religious, but he became from, and he was erratic, you could say. Like he would never learn the right thing. He would learn chassidus during Nigla learn chassidus. He was doing a lot of erratic things in yeshiva, you can say. We had an older chassid in yeshiva. His name was Reb Mendel Aranov. The older chassid, Russian, Baal Serious Nefesh, Shechet in Russia, and he used to daven in yeshiva by us. And the Rosh Yeshiva spoke about this bacher to him, and he says you should check this bacher's yichus, his lineage.
Ooh.
And they checked it. They found out he wasn't halachically Jewish.
So what did they do about it?
And they told him that he's not halachically Jewish, and he left yeshiva, and no one ever heard of him again.
Oh, nuts.
But he wasn't actually Jewish. Meaning, if somebody does something erratic or extreme, it's a sign that very possibly something is not straight.
And he was from Russia, right?
This boy was from Russian family, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Why should?
Yeah, and correct. And it could be many confusions going on over there.
Yeah.
Fine. Somebody says, I need to wear shoes, and if I don't have shoes, I can't be chazan. He should not be chazan, even if he is barefoot. Because perhaps he's following some avodah zarah, perhaps he's following a type of heretical belief. Some say that he thinks he's in the Chaim Sofer adds on, he thinks that he's in the Beis HaMikdash, right? And we're not allowed to make a Beis HaMikdash outside of the Beis HaMikdash. And there are all types of, especially in the times of the Mishnah, there are all types of different beliefs. People try incorporating different beliefs, not, who are the Chacham, who are the sages to tell us what to do? And so the Chacham and the sages were very strict about that. This person might be one of those. You have to be careful. Fine. Somebody who has tefillin, which are round. And we have some props over here, thanks to Rabbi Wilansky. And I found some pictures online. Right? You have round tefillin. Sakana, it's a danger. What is the danger of tefillin? So here is proper tefillin. Let me first put a picture on the screen. Here is tefillin that we have today.
Where?
Square. It has to be rubua, square. It's actually halacha l'Moshe Sinai, going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's one of the traditions that we have going back to Mount Sinai. Tefillin has to be square. Now, it does not have to be microscopically square. First of all, it's something that's impossible to make sure that everyone has it. Second of all, even back then, I don't think they were able to. Nowadays, the quality of tefillin is much better than it was back then. Back then, they would use any type of leather they could get, any skin they could get, and it wasn't always the best quality. Nowadays, Baruch Hashem, although the market is bigger, there's a much wider selection, you could say, of good quality materials, good quality leather from what tefillin is made out of. So many times, tefillin could become misshapen. We have today nowadays what's called gasus, where the skin, I'm just going to open the tefillin, is very thick. Gasus, and God forbid, whatever, shouldn't do that. But one could even, let's say, play football with a tefillin, and nothing will happen to the parsha as to what's inside.
Wow.
Older tefillin, many of the older ones are called dakas, very thin. And even if somebody would put it onto their hair and the hair is wet, after a few days, it could become misshapen. It's called dakas. And many people still buy dakas. It's less expensive tefillin, but you should know you're getting a payoff. Now, these type of tefillin, you see these called the tefillin are square, but they're round over here. What happened? These were found in Cairo, Geniza. Now, Geniza is where they put, it's like Shemus, where they put svarim that have to be disposed of. You can't throw it out. You can't burn it. You put it away, you bury it, or you put it away in an attic or a big chimney, as it was in Egypt, and kept it there for years. So if something was found in the Geniza, it's a sign that it wasn't good anymore. So this is some tefillin that was found in the Geniza, but you see, it became round. It wasn't, I'm assuming it was in the beginning square. That's how tefillin were made, assumingly.
Unless maybe it was actually.
But over time, it became misshapen, especially it's in Geniza for hundreds of years, heat and cold.
Could it be a bit
See,
actually from a Karaite or something? Or?
It could be from, another thing is the Karaites, right? They only believed in Torah Shebeksav, the written Torah. They did not believe in the oral Torah. So Halach al Moshe Misinai, something which came from Moshe Rabbeinu, they did not believe in. So it could be it was their tefillin as well. There are many Karaites in Cairo.
Oh, definitely.
Right, the Rambam was fighting against them tooth and nail. So perhaps it's a Karaite tefillin. Sort of like a Dead Sea Scrolls who came from a certain cult, which they're putting in Geniza, they were hidden because no one's supposed to see them, not to bring any proofs from them. Right? But these are tefillin the way they're made nowadays.
Were they able to see the scrolls inside?
They saw in the Qumran caves, you know what those are? It was during the Bar Kokhba revolt, many Jews hid in caves. So in Qumran caves, they were actually able to see the actual tefillin, the parshas inside. And there's copies, it's online, you could find it. Yigal Yadin, he was a famous archaeologist, used to be the chief of staff during the War of Independence in Israel. Later on, Yigal Yadin became an archaeologist, to say the greatest antiquities thief in history. His own collection. But he found the old tefillin. Is a story. He was on a train carrying the old tefillin parshas to bring it to a sofer in Tel Aviv, and a Lubavitcher came over to him asking him, "Do you want to put on tefillin?" And he said no. And then he said, "I recognize your accent. It's not Israeli. Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Russia." He said, "When did you come?" "I came from Russia 2 months ago." Talking about the 60s or 70s. It's just 2 months ago you came from Russia? Did you put on tefillin in Russia every day? He said, yes. He said, okay, you know, if you put on tefillin in Russia every day, I'll put on tefillin also. And he put on tefillin with him on the train. And then the Lubavitcher Chassid went on to the next person. Another lady came over to Yigal Yadin on the train.
And let's say this is a Lubavitcher had come from Russia 2 months before.
Yeah. There was a stop in Kfar Chabad on the train, on the train to Tel Aviv from Yerushalayim.
And another woman.
And a woman goes over to Yigal Yadin and he says, the chassid who asked you didn't recognize you because he just came from Russia 2 months ago. He doesn't know Yigal Yadin. But he says her name is Shifra Marazov. She comes from Kfar Chabad. Her husband, Chabad chassid, he was killed in the Sinai desert in 1956. As a soldier, her husband was killed. Like she made every year a bar mitzvah for orphans of the of children of the IDF, and he says, so I wanted to say that for me it means especially much because my husband, her husband was I think Aryeh Murazov. He was killed in the Sinai desert during the war, and he was killed right after he put on tefillin with all of his friends in the war, in the trenches. So Yigal Yadin says, I want to show you a surprise. He opened up his briefcase and he says, here are the original parshas of the Qumran tefillin, which were put on about 2,000 years ago. These are original. I'm bringing them out to Tel Aviv to be scanned and to get checked, etc. And she showed him the tefillin. So tefillin are around for a very long time, but the quality of tefillin from back then wasn't like we have nowadays. The tefillin we have now is much stronger quality. So that is one type of round tefillin. Like this. But you see the bottom was square, and perhaps the top was square as well, it seems like. These are the tefillin found in the Geniza in Cairo. But tefillin in this type of shape, I don't know if you can really see, all right? Let's say it's tefillin like this, cylindrical in shape. That could be a little issue. It's called sakana. It's danger. What is danger? Let's see what the Mishnah says. If tefillin are round like this, it's a danger.
Is that round?
Again? Okay. Yeah, round tefillin. The aim by mitzvah, and not just there's a danger, there's no mitzvah. Because tefillin which are flat, right? Like this, tefillin which are flat, I'm not going to take it out because I already put on tefillin this morning. If someone, God forbid, bangs their head with the tefillin on, it might hurt, but it's not going to penetrate their head. Tefillin which are round, people could have soft skin over there. You know, you put on tefillin by your hairline. My hair is long, so I'm navelos. But you put on tefillin by your hairline over here. It could be between. It could be soft, and if a tefillin is round, and someone bangs it, it could go into their head, and that could be a danger. That's according to Rashi. According to Rabbi Tam, the danger is that since he's not putting on tefillin properly, tefillin won't protect him because tefillin are not being done properly. So agula, somebody whose tefillin are round shape. Sakana, it's a danger. The ain ba mitzvah, and there's no mitzvah at all because it's a mitzvah to have square tefillin. And he does not fulfill his obligation. Tefillin, halacha l'moshe misinai, must be only round. And there's many different Gemaras here in Menachos which talk about this.
It's talking also with cause and forehead.
Right. Like on your forehead, right? Tefillin have to be right. It has to be above your hairline. If you're bald, it's where your hairline used to be.
It should mine all day long, all morning.
Correct.
And if somebody actually would be never having, and here I don't know if there is such a condition. So I guess it would be where it would be if the person had hair.
Correct. Nisana al mitzchay. If somebody, tefillin are supposed to go by your hairline. If somebody put it lower down on his forehead, not where it's supposed to be, but it's still, as the Torah says, bein einecha, so between your eyes. Oyal pas yadai, or if a person puts tefillin on their arm, on their hand, on their palm.
Al yadecha.
He said, yadecha means your arm, and then we do some of the scraps on our finger, but nothing goes onto your palm. But if a person takes the Torah literally, and he says, it should be between my eyes, so he wears a tefillin right there between his eyes, or he wears a tefillin on the palm of his hand. Harezu derech minus. This is a way of the heretics, those who do not believe the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the words of the Chachamim, the words of the sages, because the heretics, the Tzedukim and the Karaites, they would take the Torah literally. They don't believe in the tradition we have from the Chachamim to listen to the sages, and therefore they would say that they would put it literally between their eyes, way down here. They put the tefillin on their arm, and we say ayadecha on your hand. What does it mean ayadecha? It means kineged halev, opposite your heart. So we put our tefillin over here, right, on your arm, right opposite your heart. They do it on their hand. Other things, yadcha, yadkeya, should be on your weaker arm, on your left hand, or if you're a lefty, on your right hand. They don't hold of these because these are all from the Chachamim, from the sages. So if somebody does one of these, it's a sign that they have heresy inside of them. Now, sipan bizahav. If somebody covered their tefillin in gold, I did the mitzvah properly. So there's no gold covered tefillin, but I did see some gold tefillin boxes. If you're interested in ordering, you can order some gold tefillin boxes. Tzipan bizav. If you covered your tefillin with gold, I want to honor the mitzvah with gold. Well, you're honoring the mitzvah by doing not what the Torah says to do. It's like saying, Dovi came home for Mr. Nadish came home for dinner tonight. He's very hungry. I decided to make him a beautiful steak out of gold. He's hungry, he can't eat it. So if you're not doing what the Torah says, it's not doing any mitzvah at all. Tzipa bezahav. If one covered the tefillin in gold, unisana al beis unkeli shalai, or someone takes a tefillin, instead of putting it on their hand, they're putting it on their garment, putting it directly on their sleeve. I don't know if you can see it there. Yeah, putting it on their sleeve. Harezu derech hachitzainim. This is the way of what's called the outsiders. It's not the meaning, not those who deny and scoff the Torah, but they're pretty close to it. So they call it the chitzainim, the outsiders. They're still putting on tefillin in the right spot, on their hand, on their arm next to their heart. So they do believe in the Chachamim, in the sages, but they say, I don't need a rabbi to tell me how to listen. Meaning, I can listen to the rabbis of the Shulchan of the Gemara or the Halachah Moshe Sinai, but how to interpret it, I could do it myself. I myself am a rabbi.
It used to be a problem in the days of the Gemara.
And therefore, I don't have to put it directly on my arm, on the actual skin. I could put it on my sleeve of my garment, of whatever I'm wearing. This is called the way of the Chitzoniim, the way of the outsiders, because they're not deniers, they're not heretics who don't believe in the Torah. But it has to be in a way of, it has to be listen to the Chachamim, to the sages and everything. Our Chachamim say, when we put on tefillin, we say the end of Parshas Bay, and we say Leman Tia Torah Hashem Befichas, as Rashi says. The Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth. What does it mean the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth? So mina mutter beficha, our sages tell us, from what you're allowed to eat. Meaning that the tefillin have to be made out of the hide of a kosher animal. I cannot take alligator hide and make tefillin. Why? Because it's not a kosher animal. Has to be something mina mutter which is allowed to be eaten. And it's edible, could be eaten. Could gold be eaten? No. I know they sell Trump vodka as gold vodka and vodka with gold flakes inside, right? But maybe that's gold flakes, but you can't eat gold. Now, listen, gold's, if you eat it, it's not like you ate not kosher, right? It's not forbidden to eat, but it's not something that's edible. So you can't have tefillin covered in gold. Tefillin have to be made out of the hide of a kosher animal. So if somebody covered the tefillin in gold, then the tefillin is not valid. In addition,
is that an asmata? The Torah should be in your mouth, and they're just doing halach moshe in Sinai.
It's a Gemara Menachos. It says, right? We say, okay. The Gemara Menachos is the one who has all the halachas about putting on, about making tefillin and the size of tefillin.
Okay.
Menachos Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. It also says should be a sign upon your hand. What does it mean? Should be a sign. L'cha, for yourself, meaning it doesn't say your tefillin have to be visible for everyone to see. It says it should be a sign for you. Meaning your tefillin don't have to be visible. As a matter of fact, many people, what they do is they put on tefillin, right? And then they actually take their sleeve and they cover it. They can't see the tefillin when they're putting it on. Many people do that. And they're basing it on the Gemara, which says that it should be for you a sign upon your hands, and not for anybody else. And nobody else has to see the tefillin but you. And therefore, you're not allowed to put tefillin on your arm on the outside sleeve. Again, now, obviously, if somebody has a cast, so if their place of their bicep is not covered by the cast, they should put on tefillin there, put the straps around the outside of the cast, and then do the hand, whatever they can. But if their entire arm, all the way up to their bicep, is covered in the cast, there's many places which say not to put on tefillin on top of the cast. because you're not putting it onto your arm. And although it says that if you could do it, you should put on tefillin without a bracha over there, without a blessing, because at least, there's opinions which say that it's not likuva, that after the fact, it's okay. If you put on tefillin on your sleeve on the outside, after the fact, it's okay. You should still do it without a bracha, but it's still a discussion if your one is even fulfilling the mitzvah, if it's on their clothes. So these things don't necessarily invalidate the mitzvah as much, meaning putting tefillin, if it's covered in gold, at the end of the day, you put on tefillin. And putting on tefillin on a sleeve, at the end of the day, was on his sleeve. But it's still a way of Zkainim, and you wouldn't make a bracha on such a way of doing it, but he has fulfilled his obligation. We have somebody who comes to Kollel Boker every single morning, which now he has a cast, and he puts on tefillin with us. And we asked the rabbi, and the rabbi said, you don't have to put on tefillin on his arm till he gets better. The Rashba writes an interesting thing, that if somebody put on tefillin on their head, and it's over a cap, it's not directly on their skin, he says you could still fulfill your obligation, because as we learned earlier in Mesechta, it says, and all the nations of the world will see that Hashem's name is on you. It says, Elu tefillin these are tefillin that are on the head, in the head. And as long as it's visible to the outside, he says it's okay. Now, it's not the halacha. Halacha has to be directly onto your skin. And as Gemara itself says, Elu tefillin sheberosh, these are tefillin which are in the head. Gemara says, my taima, what is the reason that if somebody says, I only want to daven with white clothes, or I only want to daven while wearing shoes, they're not allowed to daven bichazan at all, even with color clothes, and even barefoot. Kashinan shema minus nizr kabai. We're worried perhaps he has a little bit of heresy inside of him, and therefore he cannot be a chazan. You can't be a chazan if you don't believe in Hashem. Even if somebody gives a valid excuse for whatever reason it is, for example, I want to honor Hashem better by wearing white clothes. Once you're asked by everyone to be chazan, you shouldn't say no. Right? So even if, it would be better, still, if he's not ready, you have to do it anyways. But if he's asked to be chazan and he says, it's more respectful to be chazan in white clothes, I'd rather not be chazan. But if you want me to be chazan in colored clothes, I could, that's fine. If you're wearing a talis, it's definitely not an issue at all, because your talis is white. Continues the Gemara, Ha'oisa tefilasa agula, sakana hilai, someone who makes tefillin round, like he exposes himself to danger. Sorry. Which one I want to make a little perspective when we're talking about apikorsim, minim. People don't believe. You don't really have this thing nowadays. As Malbim writes, that back then, in the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara, the difference of a Torah scholar and a non-Torah scholar was, let's say, from Mount Everest to the Death Valley, or to the Dead Sea. Someone who was a Torah scholar was a tremendous Torah scholar, and someone who wasn't couldn't even get an aliyah, couldn't read the Torah, couldn't do anything. They were literally almost didn't know the aleph base. Now, when a person comes to shul and he respects the shul, they're going to wear respectful clothing as well. If a person has no idea what's happening in shul, he walks into shul thinking that it's just who knows what I'm walking into, then he's not going to wear respectful clothes to shul. So if somebody says, I don't want to be chazan because I'm wearing colored clothing, it shows that he's not really a person who put himself into the zone, into being in shul. When you're going to shul, you shouldn't be focusing on clothes. Focus on Hashem. Don't focus what the person's wearing. Focus on Hashem. At the end of the day, clothes are only clothes, right? But what really matters is who the person is inside. Somebody who makes tefillin round in a circle, it could be a danger. If ain't ba mitzvah and there's no mitzvah, says the Gemara, Lema tanina lahu laha detanu rabbanan tefillin mirubai salach lamash Sinai. Perhaps we already learned this in a different Mishnah, which stated that tefillin. This Mishnah is a proof to what it says in a Brisa that tefillin must be square. Halach Moshe Sinai, as a law going back to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. So it must be square based on that. The Amar Rava, and Rava says the Tifran Balach Sainan. When it says that tefillin must be square, it means it must be square along the seams. And it must be square along the diagonal. Let me just stop the background, just in order to make this a little bit more visible, more easier to see. So let me take off the cover. Here are tefillin. You know, you're doing this for purposes of learning tefillin, so you're allowed to take it out. Okay. If you could see a little bit closer, you see on the bottom over there, you can probably see in the screen over here, you see the tefillin are sewn closed, and it's with gidin. It's made out of the veins of the animal. Let's make it large. Right. So when it's so closed, it has to be an exact square, and the tefillin itself also have to be a square. This is exactly a square, and the bottom, the Tiferes is a square, and this is an additional, although it's part of the same piece, this is not part of the actual square. It has to be, it can't be round, it has to be square. Again, it doesn't have to be microscopic. We don't, halacha generally doesn't take into consideration microscopic things. A bug, if you can only see with a microscope, you're allowed to eat. There are many insects that are microscopic that a person is eating when they're eating vegetables. It's something visible to the eye, which is an issue.
And scientifically, we now know we can't make things exact. There's always going to be some error to begin with.
Correct. And you're never going to have things exact. But nowadays, it's tefillin, which are much better quality, right? Especially the gases, thick tefillin are good. It's my father's Mitzvayim Pir. You can see it's not, even with your own eye, you can see it's not perfectly square over the years. But that's fine. If it becomes too round, that's an issue.
Can I share a story?
Sure.
There was a guy who, his wife was sick, and he sent this film to be checked. And the sofer came back and said, "Is this your second wife by any chance?" And he said, "Yeah, how did you know?" And he said, "There was a problem with the bias, and there was a bias in the Rabbeinu Tam. And since the bias corresponds to the wife, the house,
Wow.
and it was Rabbeinu Tam, I wondered whether it had, it's a connection." It's a
Wow.
Ma'aseh Shahoya.
Wow. So it's amazing. So the size has to be exactly square, and it has to be, there's a certain shiur exactly the way it has to be. And Gemara Sukkah has a whole thing, what it is. And this is actually the big difference of Chabad tefillin and non-Chabad tefillin. It's tefillin, it says it's supposed to be, the shiur that it gives is daled al daled, 4 fingers by 4 fingers. So do we say that it's this square, the entire square that's 4 fingers by 4 fingers, or this top part, which is?
Oh.
These are different, you go back to the Rishonim. So Chabad is more strict. When we say that the daled, that the bias, just the square which sticks out, has to be daled al daled.
I started thinking.
And if you look, you can see it's actually pretty much an exact. Let me just make it like this again. It's pretty much an exact fit. The square over here and the top over here. It's pretty much, if you line them both up, it's pretty much an exact fit in size. Which part has to be daled al daled? The whole entire square of this or the square of this?
I was wondering, if someone actually wants to be having, straps according to non-Lubavitch, they could still use actually the backs, except Lubavitch and somehow. But it could be a mix and match over there, or?
Yeah, all questions you have when it comes to this go to a competent cipher. Yeah, that's an area which there's many people which has trained for many years in this, and all questions should go to them. But perhaps now our Mishnah, which says that round tefillin are a minus, it is heresy. Perhaps it's supporting this brisa, which says that we have a tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu from Har Sinai that tefillin must be square. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Papa says, Masnisin Davida ki amgoza. It is possible to understand our Mishnah referring to tefillin constructed round like a nut. There's two different round types of tefillin. One is like this, which I can call it round like a nut, like a ball, which that is totally not valid. You're not doing the mitzvah of tefillin. And it can put a person into danger if they bang their head, or as Rabbeinu Tam says, the danger is that they're not doing the mitzvah right. So this is what our Mishnah over here in Mesechta Megillah is talking about. But if it's not in this shape, let's say it's in a little bit of a different shape, maybe it would be kosher. Maybe if it's I don't really have a proper shape, but let's say it will be like a pancake. So this is flat over here, like an egg. Maybe it would be good, or a lentil bean, something which is I'm not sure. Let's say as phone, like some tefillin in this shape, maybe it would be fine, right? So the fact that maybe the only and therefore we need a tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu to tell us that tefillin have to be square with the both with the seams and in the diagonals. It must be perfectly square. And our Mishnah is just coming to add on one more thing. I guess we have 3 minutes left. We'll just do a little bit more of the halacha, which I touched upon very briefly. If someone puts their head tefillin, they're wearing a cap. I don't have any hats around here. If someone puts their head tefillin on top of their cap, could they have fulfilled the mitzvah? Now, in the Beis HaMikdash, you have the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. He wore many garments. And one of the garments he wore was called the tzitz and the mitznefes. Tzitz is a forehead plate. He had a mitznefes, a hat on top, and it was in a special shape in order that the tefillin should be in between. And the tefillin, well, he was wearing tefillin the entire time while serving in the Beis HaMikdash. He couldn't put the tefillin on top of his hat that he wore in the Beis HaMikdash. It had to be straight on his hair. However, the Rashba writes that it's a mitzvah to everyone in the world should see your tefillin. So if you're wearing it outside of a cap, outside on top of a hat, people could see your tefillin. So he says that you can't do it, but if it's done, you have fulfilled the mitzvah of doing it.
It happens to be on top of it now. He says
Now he says, but the Rosh does not agree with him, and they ask many questions. One of them is from din of chatzitza. They're putting things in between. We said about the hand tefillin, it has to be on your skin, a sign for you. So what about the head tefillin? It's called chatzitza. It says that they would put Mesechta Avodah Zarah, when they would crown a Jewish king, they would put on a crown, and they'll put it on the place where he puts on tefillin. That's where the crown would be placed on his head. Question is, how could the king wear tefillin and a crown together? So he said that it was very mini tefillin, very small tefillin the king had. So therefore he was able to put on. Why can't he put tefillin straight onto the crown? That means you're not allowed to put tefillin on top of something else, on top of any headgear. And there's another proof that's brought. It says in the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yochanan, I guess he lived in north in Galilee, where it gets cold in the winter. And he would be outdoors. And it says he wouldn't put on tefillin outdoors. They used to wear tefillin the entire day. That was, even today, some people who learn wear tefillin the entire day. We know our own Rebbe, used to wear talis and tefillin many hours during the day while learning. Never in public. But certain people wear talis and tefillin the whole day and learn. It says Rabbi Yochanan, when it was too cold, he would put on tefillin for the mitzvah, but then he would not put on tefillin again when going to learn because it was too cold. Now, if you're allowed to put tefillin on top of a garment, let him put on a fur hat and then put the tefillin on top, right? But from there you see also that you cannot wear your tefillin on top of something. So the halacha is that when it comes to wearing, you should not put on tefillin on top of anything else. If one did it, they should put on tefillin again without a bracha. Okay, it's important that the tefillin should be square, and that's whether square in this and square in this. It's very, very important that it should be squared. And if tefillin became non-square, there's a certain type of tefillin called shlil, which is made out of the skin of a sheep, which was in its mother's womb while the mother was pregnant, had a baby inside. So it's a special type of tefillin which is made because it's a skin of an animal of a pure sheep which never had any pleasures in this world. It's a special type of tefillin, and it's a very thin leather.
The skin of the fetus?
Skin of the fetus, yeah. Rabbi Altein's son, who's a sefer in New York, he's a very, very high sought after sefer. If you want tefillin for your son, if you're bar mitzvah that he writes, you have to ask him while your wife is pregnant. But one of his specialties is making tefillin of shlil, and one of the conditions that he makes a person is that if you go to mikvah, you can't daven for like half an hour after, because it's happened many times. People put on tefillin while their hair is still wet, and then the tefillin becomes misshapen. They have to bring it back to him, and he has to reshape a tefillin into a square. So if tefillin become non-square, you have to bring it to a sefer and to make it back into a square again. Fine. We'll pause over here. We're holding the Mishnah on the last line, not just the last line, last word of Dal Amud Beis. So with that,